Welcome back to The Conservative. Hi there, I'm Mike Lannon, your host for this afternoon, this evening, and the next 6 to 9 shows, depending upon how fast I can get back here. And don't forget that I have a show and take care of PEG TV as they take such good care of me. So here we are at the end of the election. Not the outcome at this point that I was hoping for, but there is an outcome. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today because we've got a bit of a problem in Vermont that I am going to begin to attack for the next 4 years. And those of you that listen and wish to get off your couch and go talk to neighbors about the problems we have in this country, as well as the state, as well as in our community, you'll understand my angst and why I'm saying what I say. Remember always, as I've talked before, about the triangle that Aristotle created many, many years ago. I suspect that that equilateral triangle came from somewhere other than Aristotle, but he's the first that's had it recorded. Jesus talked about the same kind of information when he was on the Sermon on the Mount, which you can find in Matthew if you are a Bible reader. And I'm going to talk for a few minutes about that equilateral triangle again, because the bottom base of that equilateral triangle is the spiritual life. It's the ability to know good from evil. It's the ability to understand right from wrong. And if you're a member of the three major religions of the world, then you know that all three religions are going to talk about the same things that I'm going to talk about today. If you're a Muslim, you talk about the spiritual side and use basically the same book, other than it's called the Quran, as the Bible, very much the same book. Some variations, but the same Bible, Quran, and then of course the Torah for the Jewish faith. Those are the three major religions of the world, but if you take the other top 10, putting you into a total of 12 or 13 religions, you're going to find out in a hurry that all of the top 10 basically talk about the same tenets for believing in a life in the future after death and what allows you to get there. And of course, we have right now the secular left, the socialist left, the communist left, trying to tell us that the state government is the religion. And people are so brazen to think that there is no God, but the state is the God, and that's exactly what happened in the recipe for life, better known for the Christians as the Bible, during the time of Noah. And God then destroyed the earth with a great flood, and in the Bible talks about how he will destroy it the second time before he comes again in fire. You guys can go to a minister and get all of that, but I did want to spend a few minutes talking about a piece of scripture that you'll find in all three books, the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran, that basically talks about how to avoid this secular view. And if you listen carefully to my words, you'll understand, and I'll just explain real quick. This comes from the book of Malachi, chapter 17. Those verses, I guess, would be verse 17 in chapter 3, 17. You have wearied the Lord with your words, yet you say, how have we wearied him? Not worried, but wearied, made him tired of what's going on. By your saying, every evil doer is good in the sight of the Lord. That's people that say everybody's going to heaven. Not true, okay? There are certain tenets that you have to practice if you think you're going, because you're a good person, you're not going to heaven. And that's the secular left saying that, and that's how people have walked away from their churches. And he is pleased with him. No, that's not true either. Or else, where is the just God? So you hear that. Why does God let that happen? God's not going to send me to hell. There is no hell. There is no afterlife. Well, those of you that are on the fence about this, you're going to find out that this nation is going to have some very big trouble, because you get what you want from the Lord. And what we want right now, it appears, is to go down the road of social communist country. We're going to throw away the 240 years of the greatest country in the world ever, the most generous nation on earth, the one that is under God, that was formed by the 39 signers of the Constitution, all of which were Christian men, not deists, but Christian men. And go read, don't listen to what these people on the left are telling you. Go read for yourself. So that being said, and knowing that people have walked away from the spiritual side of that equilateral triangle, they're walking away from the Lord, expect some form of repercussion. And I know there's people out there who the Lord doesn't do that, Yes, he does. I mean, if you read the Recipe for Life, the Bible, you read the Quran, and if you go to the radical side of either the Christianity or the Muslim side, you will see that people that really believe it deep will hurt you for not believing these things. Well, I'm not there with that kind of stuff, but I do believe that you need to read the Scripture if you're a Christian. I am, and so therefore I don't have any problem telling you that here it is. If you're an evildoer, you are not good in the sight of the Lord. And then finally we come over here to the New Testament. That Malachi's in the Old Testament, in the New Testament. And you can read the second epistle of John, which is a very short epistle. Anybody can pick that up and read it. It's not even, it's only, I think, 13 chapters and maybe 1,000 words, maybe. But chapter 2, verse 9 says this: listen carefully. Anyone who is so, quote, progressive, unquote, that he does not remain rooted in the teaching of Christ does not possess God, while anyone who remains rooted in the teaching possesses both the Father and the Son. Notice the word progressive. You can't get down this road and expect that there's going to be some kind of great consideration in the equilateral triangle called the spiritual side. The knowledge to know good from bad, right from wrong. And we have two bookends in my lifetime now, it appears, that are in defiance in the public square and, quote, are allegedly Roman Catholics. They're not, flat out. They can say they are, and they sinned profusely in the public square. The first one was John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy was a philanderer. He had as many women walking through the back door of the White House as he had walking out the front door. Marilyn Monroe was the most famous, but there are all kinds of women that John F. Kennedy was messing around with during the time that he was married to Jackie. And it's a known fact. There's been many stories written about it. There's been Secret Service agents that have talked about it. Of course, people on the Democratic side who don't want to believe these kinds of things and don't hear it from the media and don't want to look it up will totally deny it. I'm telling you, that's exactly what was going on. And I know this because my parents were Kennedy Democrats. They worked hard to get John F. Kennedy elected. As a matter of fact, my grandfather from Ludlow, Vermont, was the Windsor County Democratic chair for many years. I could say all of my life, and that would have been short because I only knew my grandfather for about 3 years. But prior to that time, he was the Windsor County Democratic chair, the county chair. So I know what the Democrats can do and have done in the past. And then on the backside of this, you've now got Joe Biden, who professes to be a Roman Catholic, and you do not have strong priests, strong bishops, strong cardinals sitting in the pulpits, sitting in the church hierarchy that are willing to take a stand. They are not men, they're weak. And those men that do stand up, that aren't involved in the scandals and all this other stuff, but they're just involved in the spiritual part of the equilateral triangle, these men that are standing up are being vilified by their bishops and their cardinals and even the Pope. This is so absolutely wrong. Now that's the Roman Catholicism part of it. I'm not quite sure about the other ends of Christianity, but I suspect that it's going on because I'm not hearing the public square voice against the sin of pro-death. And Joe Biden is pro-death. You cannot be a Roman Catholic spiritual man, Christian, and be pro-death. You cannot think that somehow or another that the killing of 62 million babies since Roe versus Wade came into being is fundamentally a correct, good stance. Not true. Not going to happen. And we're watching the slippery slope that's gone that way for the last 50 years into euthanasia now. The fact that old folks can be also eliminated from Earth because they are no longer a part of the contributory society, and that would be contributory justice. They're no longer a contributing member of society, and nobody cares that they were at one time probably very strong contributors. So in other words, we downplay and change our culture. And you have to be careful about what's going on here, okay? That's a very quick overview of the spiritual side of that equilateral triangle that Aristotle talked about. Jesus talked about it, mind, soul, and body, okay? The mind, the body, and the soul. The spiritual side called the soul. Thou shalt love thyself, you shall love the Lord thy God with your whole mind, body, and soul, with your whole heart. Those were Jesus' words. But those also came from other great philosophers of the world over time. People don't read it. They just want to hear that the soul of America, we have to fight for the soul of America, was one of Biden's tenets during the campaign. What he's talking about is the spiritual side of what I've just talked about. Taking away your religious freedom. That's what they're talking about. The religious freedom should become the state religion. That's what Karl Marx said. That's what Lenin said. That's what Stalin said. That's what Mao said. That's what Pol Pot said. That's what the dictator in Venezuela said. They had to stop Christianity. They had to stop the belief in a God. They all said it. It was right in Marx's book. And you guys can go all out there and see that. If I tear apart that part, I can start now tearing down the family structure of a nation. And if I tear down the religious tenets and the family structure, then I have to have everybody that's in that part of the equilateral triangle dependent upon the government. And that's where they're headed. And don't make any, don't think twice about that. And then you can look at the other pieces of the first five statements in the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights, where religion is number one. And you can see the attack going on there. And then freedom to speak, again, being taken away. Look at what the high-tech people did to Trump during the campaign and others as they took down Twitter feed. And I didn't see, for instance, Fox News, Neil Cavuto, stopping in the middle in the last week of the White House Press Secretary McEnany's statements, took her off the air and broke into it and made some kind of a comment. I didn't see him do that for all during the impeachment hoax. I didn't see him doing that during the dossier that was paid by Hillary Clinton. And again, that's that freedom of speech that's being stopped, which I'll come back and address in a minute here, but being stopped by the Democrats. And then there is no freedom of the press anymore. The largest and fastest news organization in this country right now can be seen by the people that fund this PEG TV show, Comcast, up in the upper ends. But it's a TV show called Newsmax. They actually are delivering the news, and you're going to have more and more people going to it. Just like people are dropping out of Twitter feed right now, they're going to drop out of Facebooks with all of these infringements. The people that have the power are going to be dropping out. And so Twitter is now going to have tremendous competition from another media group called Parler, which promises to not end free speech on their media platform. So Parler is coming. So keep that in mind as we go down through the exiting from religion, the estoppel of speech, the crushing of a free press, and then the last two, the right to assemble. Well, if you saw what happened in Washington, D.C. over the weekend and then watched Antifa with no results or consequences for their bad behavior, and Black Lives Matter for their consequences for their and results for their bad behavior, as they're from behind, they hit people in the backs of the head, bloody-nosed people, beat old people up, men and women and children, okay? Not from the front side, all with masks on, all dressed in black, and I'm just saying that I hope somewhere along the line someone steps up and stops this nonsense. But I haven't heard Biden say a word of it, not a word, and neither has his potential vice president. And the election's not over yet. There's been no certification of the election here. The press is screaming and yelling. What business is it of them to say who the president of the United States is? They have no business. But they're screaming and yelling and telling us that Trump should concede. Why? For the last 4 years, this is a gentleman that has had nothing but 24/7 pressure from the press and pressure from everybody else who said he was an illegitimate president. Well, I'll get into that in a few minutes too, about the 4 major cities in this country that have cheating going on, and we know it. Okay, there are now 900 affidavits of people that have witnessed the cheating. Well, we're probably going to have 90,000 because the court systems, I suspect, are not going to do anything, especially if the court has to start with the liberal judges who don't read the Constitution or study the law, but just plain willy-nilly, arbitrarily throw out what their view is, and it's going to be a left view. It's not a fair view. And you're not going to have the 72 million Americans, which I will also talk about in a minute, that voted for Trump, going to give Mr. Biden a unifying, peaceful 4 years if he survives it, okay? So we've talked a great deal now about the spiritual side. I want to talk about very quickly the right-hand side, then we're going to talk about the intellectual side of this equilateral triangle. The right-hand side of the equilateral triangle, if you're visualizing this in your mind, 3 sides that are absolutely equal, you're going to know then in a hurry that you have to have a physical side. And again, here we go with the left allowing people, by not encouraging physical fitness, but encouraging instead with mandates, the removal, and I don't mean the mandate for COVID, which is who knows what all of that is, not based in science. If you read, it's so confusing. This mask right here that I have in front of my hand, CDC and the WHO, World Health Organization, have reports, you can go to that these are useless. They do not work. And yet you'll have people swear by them that they're preventing disease. Well, if they're preventing disease, then how come we've got the fastest rising number of cases with people that have been wearing them? They don't tell you that, but people that have been wearing the mask are now getting as much of the COVID disease as those who did not wear the mask. So it becomes very interesting because they don't tell you the entire truth, as we now have close to 10 million more Americans now with COVID. And nobody in the press telling the whole truth, which is the death rate, which is back in March was horrendous, is much, much lower. Yes, President Trump was right. 1 death from this miserable, horrible plague is not good. And he abhorred it. And the press would not report how hard he was trying to bring about an end to the pandemic. And now, of course, we have 2 very likely candidates for the vaccine. One that comes from Moderna that is at 95.4 or 95.5% accurate. Pfizer is just a little less than that, but there's 2 coming, and there's 2 or 3 more coming. They're competing capitalistically, okay, for first to have the vaccine. It's going to make a lot of money for these folks. It's what capitalism is. And I know that Mr. Trump said that anyone that needed this vaccine would be getting it because it's so heavily funded by the government that should someone need it, they're going to get it for free, which is the way it should be. Excuse me. Must be COVID. Have to sneeze. Must be. These are the panics that people are in, and it's not true. The numbers are low compared to what it's been for flu, what it's been for other pandemics. People don't remember back in the 50s, people got polio like it were going out of style. It was a very bad disease, and you didn't have the panic that we're having right now from COVID. And did people die from polio? Yes, but more egregiously, people were paralyzed for the rest of their life. They lost legs, the use of legs, the use of arms. Some people lost the use of their entire bodies and wound up in iron lungs. This was an egregious thing. But the physical fitness part of that equilateral triangle is very, very important. Staying healthy, doing the physical part, going out for a walk, going out for a run, going out for a swim, going out for a hike, going out for a round of golf, doing something other than playing nothing on your couch, just being a bump on the log. That's what we're talking about when we talk about the physical side, okay? Very, very important. Thomas Edison said it, I guess the best I've ever read, was the fact that the brain, the body was only necessary to move the brain. That was all. That was Thomas Edison's idea. And the Greeks talked about the fact that the physical education was that the energy beget energy. And if you wanted to have an energy source, you wanted to have high energy, people say I have high energy. Lots of people sometimes think I'm on something. I'm not. Okay, I've always had high energy because I've always exercised. I exercise even now at my age. I'm out there 5 miles a day, almost every single day, sometimes more than that. This past, since March till right now, I've had the longest distance I've run is 18 miles. Why? Because I know that energy begets energy. I believe in the equilateral side of the triangle. I believe in the spiritual side, and I love exploring the unknowns of the spiritual side. I love the physical side because I love to see just exactly how far at my age I can push my body without it breaking down. And I know when to stop. You should too. You should know that exercise is important. Gaining 150 pounds from your youth to now is probably not the good way to go, okay? And finally, I want to just talk real quick as my time runs here on the intellectual side, because on Saturday evening of this past Saturday, presidential frontrunner Joe Biden did say, who actually isn't become the president-elect until the vote counts are certified. There's nothing been certified, so he can do all the talking he wants, and so can Trump, and nothing is in stone yet. But he did give a preliminary victory address, and in that address, he spoke of his mandate to govern, a mandate that he said that extended to marshaling. I love the word marshaling. Okay, that's martial law in my mind. The forces of decency. What decency? Yeah, you know, the left is the ones that have burned down our cities during the summer. Fairness. What fairness? I don't see the right to assemble by those folks peacefully on the right without being disturbed. Science, science paid by who? Climate change, paid by who? Where does the money go? If I give you $1 million, I'm going to expect some kind of result that is the way I think. I'm not going to give you $1 million, and that's what's happened in the climate change thing. The reports are suspect. They're not being challenged by anybody. And hope, you're not going to get hope unless you're in the spiritual side of things, okay? There is no hope to be given by mankind to another man. That's not happening. We're too selfish for that kind of stuff, which is pretty vague mandate, as it turns out in my mind. It's pretty darn vague. But there was another overarching mandate that he talked about. He expressed a mandate to come together, to unify as Americans. That's what Marx said about unifying the Europeans, the Russians. To make progress, we must stop treating our opponents as our enemy. Then stop. Stop doing it. Because I don't see people on the left. I see the press saying it's on the right. No, I don't see these two militia groups attacking anybody. But yet, all through the election, Trump was a racist, and he was xenophobic, and he wouldn't denounce those people on the right that were militant. They weren't doing anything militant. I don't see the left denouncing Antifa. I don't see the left denouncing pigs in a blanket. I want to see them fry. I don't see that group being denounced by Biden and his cronies. But we are not enemies, we are Americans. Well, you're going to find out, Mr. Biden, that there's 72 million Americans that don't believe that at all. There's going to be a resistance. Matter of fact, I heard coming in today, a gentleman talking on the radio about being a part of that resistance. Then how do we equate the actions of the left in the Washington, D.C. when they attacked old men and women and children for having a political view other than their own? That's this past weekend. All of that is nice. Who wouldn't like a country in which we could enjoy cultural events together without being lectured about the alleged evils of the country, in which we could attend family events without being castigated as bigots, in which we could disagree and still enjoy one another? Who wouldn't like an America in which our neighbors no longer see us as cancel culture targets, in which we no longer have to fear our compatriots rioting and looting over supposed systemic injustices, in which our social interactions are not limited by our voice, by our voter registration. But Americans are right to have some rather serious trust issues, with calls for unity in our polarized time. After all, former President Barack Obama pledged American reunification right up until he began treating Tea Partiers as unspeakable threats and political opponents as crypto-racists. Those are Obama's words, not mine. Everything was hopey and changey right up until the time that it wasn't. For 4 years of the less hypocrisy, what about Obama's scream of yesterday when he said we need to all unite behind Biden? What a joke. This isn't going to happen for the 72 million voters who voted for Trump and genuinely believe that the Democrats stole the election in 4 major cities. As I spoke earlier, Detroit, fraud. Philadelphia, fraud. Reno, fraud. Milwaukee, fraud. 4 major states, 4 major cities, and democratically controlled and democratically pulled strings, lost votes, added votes, no signatures verified, dead people voting. There's a string of them, 900 affidavits already coming out of those cities for people that watched and saw fraud going on. Let's not talk about the 100,000 votes found in Georgia last night and all for Trump. Who is the cheat? So, in order to earn our trust, Biden would have to call his own side out for raising the temperature, and he has steadfastly refused to do so. Hiding, sliding Biden hasn't come out of his bunker all summer long to say anything about the riots, and he's not going to do it if he does become president. He hasn't called out Black Lives Matter for the suggestion that America is systemically racist. He has cheered it on. He hasn't condemned Antifa. He has deemed it a philosophy rather than a dangerous movement. And he certainly hasn't said a word about the continued attacks on Trump supporters. We will wait in vain for Biden to chide former First Lady Michelle Obama for declaring that 70 million Americans voted for the status quo, even when it meant supporting lies, hate, chaos, and division. I'll tell you where the lies, the hate, the chaos, and division came. The Democratic Party for the last 4 years. Go look at the videos. Go look at the actual things that were going on in Congress. And then find out why the Democrats are crying today. Because they didn't get the congressional blue wave that they thought they were going to get, and wait until 2022. You think it's bad now. We may lose because of the billions of dollars that are going to be spent in Georgia. We may lose the Senate for 2 years, but look out. There's only one last ride here before it goes communist. Those of us that really believe in America are going to stop this movement one way or the other. And you know I'm getting tougher and harder than I have in the past because I am going to be a piece of this resistance. You're going to hear my voice. Our bones will likely bleach before Biden tells Hillary Clinton that Trump supporters aren't deplorable, or as Biden said, chumps. No unity in the Biden formulation isn't a recognition of what we have in common. It's a demand that we silence ourselves in order to mirror Biden's priorities. Unity, you see, can be achieved one of 2 ways: through recognition of the other, through a determination to understand those who think differently than we do, or through ideological domination. It's rather obvious with pathways Democrats will choose. After all, social ostracization is one of their most powerful tools. Why disarm now? Americans only come together when we share a common philosophy, a history, and culture. Democrats have spent years attempting to tear away those commonalities in favor of a coalition of interest group politics. They've declared American philosophy racist from inception. They've declared American history a litany of brutalities. They've declared American culture bigotry embodied. Now they want unity, the unity of absolute victory. Ironically, it's that very desire, the desire for monolithic control, that we will be their undoing. Unless Biden is serious about unity, unless he's willing to cross the aisle and recognize the humanity of those with whom he disagrees, and to call out those on his own side who won't. Biden's term is likely to be contentious, polarizing, and ultimately unsuccessful. So Biden and the left think, and that would be all of you out there listening to this show who voted for an illegitimate president-elect, Joe Biden, who will call us stupid, which means we show a great lack of intelligence or common sense. I say bunk. And thanks for listening. It was a fast show, and I hope that you go out in the next year and a half to 2 years and do something, or else lose America. Thanks a lot for listening. Bye now.